Hi, I'm historian and psychotherapist Andy Erdman, and this is Feel Familiar? Emotionally Intelligent History, a show where we look at important, but sometimes little known or forgotten events and people from the past in order to better understand the present day. We'll also see how feelings, thoughts, fantasies, and ideas drive people to make history.
There's more to history than what you've been taught. History repeats, it may or may not. Time's got baggage, we all do. Erdman's here to walk us through what, when, where, how, who. Feel familiar? Crack the spine, a time's-old script. We're diving in where the facts have slipped. It's history told with wit and care, with ghosts and deaths, no thoughts to spare. Who, what, why, how, where. Feel familiar?
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Feel Familiar. Last time we saw that on the night of May 10th, 1849, Ned Forrest is doing his Macbeth down at the Bowery Theatre, while Macready is doing his own Macbeth up at the fancier Astor Place Opera House. Outside the Opera House, a mob, so-called, is smashing windows, trying to break its way in. Inside, agitators are throwing chairs and interrupting the performance, and they sometimes force Macready and his fellow actors to do a dumb show, a mime show, because they can't be heard. And eventually, General Sanford will order his soldiers to open fire, and mostly innocent people are killed. All right, let's jump in and see what's going to happen next. So things had come to a head with the followers of Ned Forrest, who is this very popular American actor, who were really angry at William Macready, who was playing Macbeth at the Astor Place Opera House on the night of May 10th, 1849. The police and the mayor knew there was going to be trouble. They call out the military, but they do not cancel the show. They do not warn the citizens. And most of the people showing up are outside the Opera House, and it gets to a crowd of 15,000, which is 3% of the New York City population at the time. They're just there to see what's going on. The play goes on. Sometimes they have to do it in mime because the people are shouting and screaming and throwing things. And the cops are rounding up people in the theater and sticking them down in the basement. A couple of times, William Macready asks these theater managers, could we quit? And they're like, no, it's going great. It's going great. The windows are smashed. It's mostly young boys, because it always is, doing the damage. And there's a guy named Ned Buntline, who's kind of the January 6th shaman of the event. He's kind of egging them on. The soldiers are eventually called in, and the crowd has been led to believe or misbelieve that they don't have live ammo, but they do. And eventually they open fire, and there is shock because people are shot and injured, and some are killed. And the wounded are taken to drugstores and police precincts and hospitals. They're laid out on billiard tables in local saloons. And a lot of people die because, disinfecting wounds is not a thing yet. And battlefield medicine, it's still developing. They actually finish Macbeth, and the crowd in the Opera House finally exits at 10 p.m. William Macready slips away in disguise. And by 11 o'clock p.m., quiet prevails. Now, Mary, you've been with us on this journey. Just wanted to check in. Any thoughts, since we last spoke, or anything you wanted to point out? Wanted to give you a little platform here.
2 words.
Yes.
Alec Baldwin.
Can you say more? That's intriguing.
Do I really need to elaborate, Andy? No. I was thinking...
Oh, yes.
Because of the issue of I was blanked. Oh, wait, It wasn't.
Yeah,
that whole we were just kidding around. Oh, somebody's dead.
Yeah.
It's a similar situation.
Yes, now I get it. And
safety first is what I'm saying.
Right. If somebody points a gun at you, best to assume not blanks.
Right.
I think there were so many people, they couldn't even see the soldiers. And by the way, they're firing grape shot, which is not as tasty as it sounds. It's just these little musket balls that explode all over the place and just randomly kill people, mostly just onlookers.
If they're going to call it that, then I demand that they create grapes that explode.
Exploding.
When you eat them.
Okay, let's think about that.
If grape shot is like exploding bullets or balls, and you're going to call it that, then I want actual grapes that you can eat that explode in your mouth. I'm talking like Pop Rocks, like grape flavored Pop Rocks. Look, I'm just.
That's a great. No, that's a great.
They're not all gems. Okay. I'm just
they are,
talking.
But they are. I wonder if that was the name of like a sort of party boy cocktail at the time. Oh man, give me a beer and a grape shot to go. And literally they fire a musket. There's like a musket filled with whiskey. They just fire at you.
That is a great name for like a specialty drink. A grape
shot.
Give
me a grape shot. Totally. And I think amongst, war reenactors, it'd be very popular. Hey, let's go for some grape shots. Some Schlitz and some grape shots.
I like it.
Lime shot.
That's going to be some merch later on after the show's released.
I can already see the T-shirt. Mary, you can design it. Like, have a grape shot. And it's somebody just shooting a musket shot of whiskey into a guy's face.
And there's some sort of wench with like a costume with a lot of grapes, like bunches of grapes.
Exactly. And she's sort of giggling. Yeah.
Of course.
All right. Speaking of massacres of innocent human life, that's May 10th. Friday, May 11th and May 12th in New York City in 1849, there was widespread civil unrest. And the civil authorities, the mayor, the police, they want to de-escalate. Ned Forrest does not make a statement. Macready's already on his way back to England. He wants nothing more to do with what's gone on there. By the way, all those people who urged Macready to you must go on, you can't let the mob dictate what you do, they're nowhere to be seen. They are hiding out. They're frightened, not without reason, because they are on some hit lists. And there are different voices in the city. Some people are just aghast at what they call a wholesale murder of civilians. Other people are rejoicing over the defeat of the mob. And by now there are 2,000 soldiers in the streets of New York. They're getting rocks thrown at them. Shockingly and amazingly, miraculously, they don't fire. There's no more firing on civilians. A lot of spontaneous meetings. It reminds me a little of sort of what's happening in LA now. You have a lot of spontaneous organizing and some not so spontaneous. But there was a group that I wish I would belong to called Citizens Opposed to the Destruction of Human Life, which I get with that, And they meet downtown at City Hall Park, and they are squarely accusing the city authorities, the police, the sheriff, Mayor Woodhull, of the most wanton, unprovoked, and murderous outrage ever perpetrated in the civilized world. Perhaps a bit of an overstatement, given some other things, but, their heart's in the right place. And they're calling for the Opera House to be torn down. So now General Sanford, who is the guy who gave the order to fire, you might remember him from our last episode, now he has a 24-pound howitzer placed by the Opera House ready to fire. You may recall that last time he had 2 puny 6-pound howitzers. The pounds refer to the weight of the cannonball. So this is like a big honking cannonball. They don't fire it. Protesters are now streaming up from Philadelphia. And there are bonfires started. And 9th Street, which, Mary, you and I probably remember well from being at NYU, is barricaded. And that is like a bad sign. When streets were barricaded in the 1800s, it meant a revolution was going to happen. Did you see Les Miserables when it was on Broadway? Or
Oh, yeah, hon. We all saw it. It was so beautiful. They were homeless. They were homeless, but they weren't they didn't have a bad attitude about it. They sang songs about it.
Yeah, they just needed some food and water.
They just needed some food and water. That's all.
Yeah, that's all. So anyway, people are pissed at the mayor. They say, you knew that something was brewing. You didn't call it off. You gave in to the upper 10, the city's wealthy elite. And yeah, so Philip Hone, who had been the mayor of New York and is definitely kind of the aristocracy of the city, says it was necessary to make a show of force for a mob raised to serve the purpose of such a fellow as Ned Forrest. We have to crush them in the name of the respectable part of our citizens. By the way, I was reading a book which compared fear of the mob at the time to fear of fire. It's like this thing that spreads, it's creeping in, it's everywhere. It's like the illegals, the gangs, the pedophiles, somehow they're everywhere. Anyway, the upper classes say, if you'd have shut down the show, which would have resulted in saving people's lives, you would have elevated their edicts into laws. And so they're all on about defeating the mobocracy. If mobs are allowed with impunity to commit their infamous outrages, no person advocating the opinions of any sect or party can be safe. So again, there's mob mania. And people might want to be aware that at the time, the wealthy citizens of American cities were funding these private militia groups in the event that the mob, usually immigrants or communists or whoever, take over the streets. And there's a group in New York, it still exists, called the Knickerbocker Greys, who were this kind of private army. And in Boston, there's a group called the First Corps of Cadets, who are fascinating. They'd been around since the 1700s, but they are all suited up as soldiers, and they get their own armory, their own kind of fortress. Mary, in your experience, we've talked about this a little, when you take a bunch of men and put them together for a very serious purpose, and they end up having a lot of time on their hands, because it turns out there aren't mobs roving around the city, what do the men start doing with all that time they have on their hands together? There's no girls.
They start dressing up like women and...
That's exactly right.
Yeah. They're like, you know what this party's
They
missing?
start putting on drag.
Women.
Exactly. Exactly. And I will shamelessly self-plug, if you read my book, Beautiful, the story of Julian Elting, America's greatest female impersonator. It talks all about the Boston cadets who produce these amazing drag musicals that are just complete works of art. So anyway, yeah, there's all this mob fear. And there are a lot of figures, religious figures, political figures who are inveighing this way and that. There's a man with the absolutely wonderful name Henry Bellows, who is a pastor at the Church of the Divine Unity, who, during his Sunday sermon, preaches against these people with a secret hatred of property and property holders. That's who the mob is. And Mary, are you interested in reading a passage from the sermon that Mr. Bellows gave, Pastor Bellows gave?
I have always wanted to play Henry W. Bellows, pastor of the Church of the Divine Unity. What actress hasn't wanted to play that role? Listen.
I'll be like a parishioner.
Okay.
I'll be like a parishioner.
Check out what Mr. Bellows had to say. That the mere love of riot, the idle desire to back a popular actor, the mean wish to humble a respectable foreign artist whose conduct has apparently been irreproachable should have carried a portion of our citizens to this height of madness is indeed a dreadful information of the success which demagogues have had in swelling a false sense of importance.
Preach it. Huzzah.
Or vitiating the proper notions of liberty among the ruder, no, I think he would roll his R's, among the ruder portion of our people. These are
vitiate our liberty.
The fruits of our political pandering is to the ignorance and vanity of people. Such is the result. I'm shaking my fist, raising a book high in the air. Such is the result of making legislators of creatures like these, who made the inflammatory speeches in the park the night after the riot. We have arrived indeed.
Oh, inflammatory.
Yes, at pretty notions of liberty, when a few hundreds of the worst portions of our people, the very worst, possess the power of disgracing the whole city, braving the authorities, and defeating the rightful will of 99/100th of the people. Now,
yes,
if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go get wasted on sherry and empty my bowels.
Your mutton chops are most impressive, Pastor Bellows, and you're right to say that those who were killed paid the just penalty of their violence and folly.
Quite right, quite right.
That was brilliant, Mary. I hope that'll be in your next stage show.
Bucket list. Check it off.
Bellows from Bellows, the story of Pastor Henry W. Bellows. Bellowing? I don't know. I'm just workshopping it here.
I'm looking forward to Bellows on Bellows, the stage show.
Yeah. Now, not unimportantly, and thank you, Mary, that was wonderful. Not unimportantly, he is Protestant and not Catholic. At the time, Catholics are held in some suspicion by the kind of Yankee upper classes.
That's the understatement of the century. That's the understatement of the century, Andy. You know, they'd had it in for us for a while now. Oh, can't stand that man, Bellows.
Yeah, it was always amazing to me when I was starting to learn in school how hard it was to have a Catholic president elected because growing up Jewish, I was like, I don't know, aren't they all part of the same big... I was somewhat naive at the time.
Right.
But yes, there was a huge prejudice against a lot of Catholics because they are Italian and Irish immigrants, by and large, some Polish immigrants as well. So yeah, they are angry. Somehow the mob represents tyranny. They are a wanton tyrannous, and they have effected a scoundrelly outrage. It'll boast of its readiness to fight for liberty while being poised to knock down any smaller man who imagines aught against his democracy. Anyway, it's all this we're in favor of freedom. You're not. No, we are. Blah, blah, blah. You're destroying our property. You're wrong. We're right. And a lot of the blame does tend to fall on Ned Forrest as a kind of agent provocateur. And it is clear that he's kind of got a thing up his butt about McCready. He does imagine a lot of, as we talked about, conspiracies and plots against him. One editorialist said, the mob determines out of its friendship to Forrest to disgrace both him and his country. It is not enough for Forrest himself to have us mortified by all manner of his contemptible, dwarfish littleness and ridiculous suspicion of his brother artist, whom he should treat with respect. Of all rulers, therefore, the Lord deliver us from a mob. In this unhappy controversy, Forrest is on the wrong side of the facts. So again, you've got all these terms, liberty, demagogues. Each is struggling. Each is trying to gain legitimacy to call themselves the real Americans, the ones in favor of freedom. And, as I've said, I think underlying this is a difficulty in letting a different story take shape. And I wanted to mention a concept from the psychoanalyst Margaret Mahler, who talked about separation and individuation. And it's a process we're all supposed to go through, and hopefully if we have good enough parenting, do go through. And if not, we end up in a lot of therapy and stuff like that to begin to appreciate other people can have a different story. And it's okay. It doesn't destroy us. And you see what happens, particularly today in the world, when we don't have that space for other people. You may remember Captain Isaiah Reinders, who's got his private militia. He's this Tammany Hall kind of brawling political functionary, and his buddy Mike Walsh. They were trying to get all these muskets. They were behind some of the rabble-rousing, and they're calling for what they call the Massacre Place Opera House to be torn down. And they're also calling... Tear it down.
I just love that they went total like Beavis and Butthead on that. They're like, Astor Place, more like Massacre Place.
That's hilarious. Hey, Isaiah, let's tear it down, okay?
That's a good one.
Could you, tear down your opera house? It's in the way. All right.
Maybe put up a bud house.
Hey, Beavis. Anyway, one of the people singled out for revenge was one of the people who signed that letter saying,
oh, no,
the show must go on. And that's Herman Melville, who lived nearby at 4th Avenue and 11th Street, and dude was lying low. And Mike Walsh makes a speech, and Mary, would you step in and do a Mike Walsh impersonation?
Where is Mike Walsh from again?
Well, he's like an Irish immigrant or the child of Irish immigrants. He's powerful in Tammany Hall politics. He's a kind of rough and tumble bruiser. He represents the poor Irish and German parts of the city. And he's Isaiah Reinders' lieutenant. And
that's right. Ringleader.
Yeah.
Oh, that's Mike Walsh. Well, let me tell you
Mike
something, Andy. Even the Emperor of Russia, who holds the lives of his people in a little better estimation than that of dogs on the street, has always required 3 rounds of blank cartridges to be fired by the troops before they fire upon the people. All right? That's the rule. 3 rounds of blanks.
Thank you there, Mike. Thank you there, Mr. Walsh. Did not know that was true, but, I will take it from your mouth as truth.
It's in the more obscure etiquette books for military. You might not have had access to them being Jewish and all, but...
No, they didn't,
I see no problem with the Jewish people, by the way. I'm a friend in our Savior. God rest his soul.
Yeah, no, none taken. We're living down in the Lower East Side tenements just as well. I have one grandparent who was born in the U.S., and that's my mother's father, and he was born in a Coldwater tenement on Rutgers Street, and poor as can be. It's one of these stories of they would chase the coal truck to pick up coal so they could have coal.
That's sweet. Yeah. I chase cars to see if I can...
To pick up gasoline?
Gasoline, mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
You have to be much quicker.
Much quicker, yeah. But, he was a plucky lad. Anyway, a bunch of the big puffy New Yorkers, they make a statement on behalf of William Charles Macready, and they say, Mr. Macready did not either directly or indirectly take any steps whatever to cause his friends to be present at the theater or to encourage in any way the opposition of those hostile to him. It's like the big PR firm comes out with this,
Right. They're like, we're going to give you a word salad that doesn't necessarily have any meaning to it, but sounds very even-keeled, so that you feel totally clueless after, but we can pretend like we've answered your question.
Yes, and to let you know that we're basically uncomfortable with your feelings. So don't have them.
And this has been entirely vetted by 3 legal teams before we've uttered a word.
Exactly. We don't know how the body turned up in the trunk, but we're sure that certain events will prove our client to have been nowhere near the trunk where the body was found.
Which I would argue, as an amateur, that very quality gives rise to the mobs that they fear.
Absolutely. Can you say a little more?
Well, that I think the rise of the current president back in the day, what facilitated that unexpected success was the popular people's frustration with political speak, also politically correct speak. Just everybody saying that the only motivation for speeches was, how can I say something that doesn't offend? How can I say something that doesn't get me in trouble, rather than how can I say or do something that helps people?
Yeah, it's a kind of corporate speak, and I think it gets a little beyond the pale here, but...
That they got wise to it, in other words. You're not saying anything that relates to me. You're not doing anything that helps me. You don't care about me. And so somebody comes along and says, I care about you, and I sound just like you do.
Yeah, even though, of course, I don't really care about you.
Right, exactly.
But I do agree. And I think you're seeing that a lot now in criticisms of the sort of New York Times reading class of centrist Democrats who are like, let me just sort of pawn off real problems with, as you put it, a word salad. And now you're starting to see it on the left as well. You're seeing people who are really calling out the so-called alternative media.
Right.
Who are able to say things in this kind of ultra-vetted way, which is just getting like tiresome.
Right.
The ultra-vetting is what's getting tiresome. I welcome the sort of truth-telling of like, let's call a genocide a genocide. Generally speaking, there is, and I think quite correctly, there is a lot of criticism heaped on the city authorities for not warning anyone and for giving in to the sort of wealthy elites and just not closing the theater. And, they say, look, one person says this is a quarrel between 2 actors, which of course it's not. It's a culture war. And it should never have gotten to this point. So each side is saying the other side, but the Macready supporters, the upper classes, are saying the opponents of Macready should either have stayed away from the theater or satisfied themselves with the usual marks of disapproval. So in other words, the upper classes are dictating in their way, and this gets to what we're just talking about. What is the proper way to express disapproval?
Right.
Even the very way of disapproval. You're seeing this also in the Israel-Palestine discourse and rhetoric, like people want to frame the ways in which one can respond. And one of the basic acts of protest is to question even that very framework. Who came up with it? Who said so?
Right, right. And can I say something here?
You can.
I love your answer. You can. You're able to, physically. I don't know that you should. No, but I just wanted to say something genuine in that when I was first, hearing you talk about this, I was sort of like, oh, Forrest, shut up. You self-important, victim-y, whiny baby. And I was very sort of pro-Macready. Like the response to the Forrest sort of impulse and bluster, the response to the riot, and the response of, what did they call it, the Big Ten or the
upper 10,
the upper 10
aristocracy, the Whigs, the elites.
Right.
Yeah.
Their pleasure at the squashing of the Forrests makes me pro-Forrest. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I almost feel like he was just, kind of like doing a little PR spin, getting some attention. Like, this is going to be my thing. I'm going to be this bad boy. blah, blah, blah. But then when things get serious, I'm like, geez, like he's tapped into something real.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm definitely aware of the fact that each group has its way of trying to sort of dominate, and each group does things to make it worse. I think each group has its problems,
Right.
and they're not quite what they say they are. And then they're depicted in the press as being a somewhat simplistic illustration of them.
Right.
But yeah, absolutely. There were a lot of moments when, in the interests of the people of the city, the people with the power could have said, let's de-escalate this, it's going to get worse. But they didn't. What they did was they reinforced their power. And I think, again, and I've said this before, I think at the moment what you have is a kind of combination of McCready and Forrest. Hey, Andy here. Just want to give a little quick explanation. So what's happening is Mary's recording this from her home, and there's an aircraft that's making a lot of noise. And I live about 1.5 miles from her. So basically, I'm going to be hearing that aircraft in about, a couple of minutes too. And that's why I say, well, then it's in my neighborhood too. So that's what we're talking about. You won't hear it. And then eventually it'll get to my neighborhood and we'll start talking about it. And in a few minutes, it's going to kind of spark a conversation about surveillance and Ghislaine Maxwell and the Epstein files. And we would have cut it all, but I think possibly it's just kind of interesting in terms of what it led to. But that'll be up to you. Okay, thanks, everyone.
It's definitely in my neighborhood.
Well, then it's in my neighborhood too.
And isn't that the point of this whole episode?
Yeah.
No, it's not.
It's not.
No. You're right, Mary. That's the good point. Like the whole thing is, it feels familiar then, it feels familiar now, because we're all kind of connected.
Right,
It's like one big neighborhood,
and therefore, NIMBY, not in my backyard, not in my country.
NIMSY. Joshua, can you edit out the sound of me throwing up a little into my mouth? Because that's what I just did. Okay. I would love to have a guest on who, no matter what is said, says, and isn't that really the point of the whole episode? Like, no, it's not. It's not. Like the worst talk show guest ever.
But then eventually they do hit upon it and you're like, yes.
Well,
yes.
I guess you tried enough. Yeah, you tried. Yes, fine. It is. But anyway, as I was saying, Mary, to your point, the people with power, control of the police and the military and politics, are criticized. And someone says, in order to gratify the offended pride of a British actor and appease the ruffled temper of some of the porcelain or better classes, the people were taunted, ridiculed, vilified, and abused. And as I've been saying, and I think part of the point of this first season is that I think what's so scary now, at least to my way of thinking, is you have both structural power and this kind of populist power coming together so that the government is able to have, soldiers and troops and police-like individuals intervening and contravening discourse and protest and taking people off the streets, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's part of the reason why I find this, this moment scary.
You know what it reminds me of too is...
What is that?
I can't remember if it was John Adams, but one of the founding fathers talking about, yay, democracy, but also, sometimes the people are wrong. Like, do you know what I mean? Like there was a little bit of discomfort and it's like almost the reverse of his fear.
Yeah. Well, this is part of the reason why the U.S. electoral system is not as democratic as it could be.
Get rid of it.
They didn't really trust people.
Get rid of it.
And I think the ultimate solution is actually to make it super democratic by taking the money out of it, by just, making everyone able to feel like they're part of the process, no matter what part of the electorate they're part of. And I don't know, we're a long way from that.
Yeah.
The people who support Forrest are called some pretty salty names, and so trigger warnings. They're called blackguards, rabble, and locofocos.
Hey, wait a second.
I love the locofocos. It was a movement. I don't even think you can call them a political party, but they were a group. First of all, great punk band name.
Totally. Absolute funkers. It's a fool. And McCready is a piece of shit. He is a piece of shit.
I'm loco. I'm foco.
I'm loco.
Followed by the rabble. Yeah, the locofocers are yet another of these groups that are sort of like, we're just in favor of freedom, liberty, and democracy. We don't know nothing. And look at what everybody else is doing. They are opposed to just simple freedom, liberty, and democracy. And the Locofocos are exhibiting something that we see sort of constantly in our era, which is projection. You project, it's the other guys who are the pedophiles, the traffickers,
Right.
the exploiters. And I just want to say this, projection is not the greatest tool because you end up blaming somebody for something you're uncomfortable with. But I do think it's an attempt to at least, it's a primitive attempt at self-introspection. It has to go beyond there. But at this point, that's where we're at. So anyway, the wealthy in New York, they are praising the city authorities. You did the right thing. It's good that the soldiers fired with no holding back. The whole city might have fallen into the hands of lawless vagabonds headed by such fellows as Walsh and Reinders. And, again, it's important to remember that the people who are opposed to the aristocracy and calling for freedom are also very, white supremacist, masculinist. And the people who are in favor of putting down the mob kind of have their own mob, right?
Right.
So the aristocracy has their own mob because they have all these backroom handshake deals between the police and these wealthy property owners and soldiers. And the city is depicted as being very divided. And one journalist of the time says you have the Bowery Boys and on the other side, the Upper Ten. And they are as divided as the white and red roses of York and Lancaster. Because who doesn't love a War of the Roses metaphor?
I know I do.
So the upper classes are delighted that the soldiers didn't hold back. They say the whole city might have fallen into the hands of lawless vagabonds, headed by such fellows as Walsh and Reinders. And it's similar to a kind of reactionary fear at the moment that there are illegals and traffickers and pedophiles. So these are, again, the kind of the boogeymen of the day, things are projected on to those characters.
Well, first of all,
Andy again. All right. So there's the plane thing again. Right. I told you it was going to happen again. Okay. Just reminding you. Okay. Thanks.
there's a plane in my neighborhood right now, an aeroplane.
Oh.
Maybe every time there's an aeroplane, we should talk about some historical event having to do with aeroplanes. I don't know how you feel about that, Andy, but
I feel good. I was just going to bring up that I have long been interested in the first crossing of the Atlantic by airplane, which was not Charles Lindbergh, as people think.
ooh,
It was 1919, these two World War I pilots, Alcock and Brown, and they flew from Newfoundland to Ireland in a janky old biplane open air. I think that's pretty amazing that they did not die and that they made it. Yeah, it's super cool.
and that they weren't Nazis.
And that they weren't Nazis, yeah. Maybe given time, they eventually became Nazis, but I'd like to think not. Yeah. So, Mary, did you want to make a...
Yeah,
Yeah, please.
because it is interesting how obsessed modern day culture is right now with the whole Epstein files.
Yeah.
And that if we just expose these files, like even I can hear that. This is all a cover up. This is all a conspiracy.
Yeah, that's why they keep cutting the
They're
internet.
Ghislaine
trying to get us to stop
Maxwell-
talking about it.
Ghislaine Maxwell is from her low security prison cell hiring planes to
She's playing with puppies, and she's like, pardon me, I have to go check on the drones I've sent out to break up this particular podcast.
Clearly there's a big fixation right now with the Epstein files and like
Mm-hmm.
this sort of hopeful, maybe naive belief that if we can just expose the Epstein files, then all the evil that plagues us is going to vanish from the earth. Like that's the secret key.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I feel like that whole like QAnon movement and
Mhm.
like, obviously, yes, nobody's like, hey, stop picking on pedophiles. Like nobody should be standing up and, cheering for the pedophiles. But it's almost as if a certain portion of the mob or the populace or whatever you want to call it tries to pick the one thing that nobody can say is good. We all hate pedophiles, right? Yeah. So those bad guys that we don't like, they're pedophiles. And you know what? People love puppies. Everybody loves puppies, right? Well, we're puppies and they're pedophiles. So it reminds me of
Yes.
like that thing you're talking about of like, what did you call it? The separation of mind or whatever?
Yeah, the sort of separateness of mind, the separation individuation,
Right.
which is sort of the adult mind really functioning.
Right. There's no gradual, gray in between these polarities.
Yeah.
It's dangerous to say that there is.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I don't want to get too much off onto this, but I think it also informs at some level, unconsciously and consciously, the sort of abortion, unborn child debate.
Right.
To the extent that, like, everyone loves children. You don't want to kill children.
Right.
No, I don't want to kill children. But you're right. Once one resorts to very simplistic kind of binaries, we're not in the realm of the kind of integrated adult mind. And we all get that way.
Right.
This is why I think reactionism doesn't so much describe a politics as a state of mind we can all get into.
Right.
When we are regressed and lacking the resources we need. It's an impulse.
Right. There's an impulse there. Like, I feel like that was at play too with the hashtag Me Too movement. It reached a point where anybody who voiced the slightest doubt of a case or a accusation or you know what I mean? It can be used by both sides and weaponized. It's complicated.
Yeah. And I think, one can be reactionary and tyrannical in one's interpersonal life and be very liberal politically and vice versa.
Right.
Right. And that's why I think when people say he's a nice man or they're nice, like, okay, but there's a moral journey for us, I think, as humans to begin to think of the whole world, and not just our own personal wounds.
Right.
But anyway, Mary, I will take it that you too believe that New York at the time was as divided as the white and red roses of York and Lancaster.
Oh, for sure.
Basically what you're saying.
For sure. Yes.
Okay. So now the mayor, the city, they got to start arresting people. And it is amazing that New York City did not break into civil war. I have to say, it's extraordinary. 47 arrests and indictments. They're all men aged 16 to 30. They're all in the Ned Forrest sort of supporter group. Most of them are Irish immigrants. A few of them are children of immigrants. Most of them are labeled mechanics, which just means they worked with their hands. There are none of the sons of the upper 10, who I'm sure were off doing their own dastardly things. But at the same time, they are not the poorest people in the city. None of them live in the poorest part of New York, which at the time is the famous 5 Points. So that's step one in restoring order. Step two is on Sunday, May 13th. Just think about this. Sunday, May 13th, 3 days after the massacre, the Court of Sessions convenes a grand jury and sends them down to the scene of the massacre. And they say, we need you to arrive at a conclusion about what happened. Like, we need it. We need an official summary. And at 7 p.m. on Sunday, May 13th, 1849, the jury returns a verdict which concludes that everyone who died because of musket shots fired by the soldiers. But the circumstances were such that the soldiers were justified in firing on the crowd. And the jury foreman, James Perkins, said maybe if you had had more police there, you wouldn't have need to have the military unload on the crowd. Who knows if that's true? So there's an attempt to kind of get the official story and the legal story to be the same. You see this happening now, too. You get the courts to say what you want to tell your story, and all of a sudden it's legal. And then comes step three, which is less than a month later, June 5th, 1849, a bunch of upper-class men are convened into yet another jury to look at what's gone on and to come to some kind of a conclusion and to charge the wrongful parties. And the judge in the case, by the way, who happens to be Irish, named Charles Daly, he says to the jurors, I want you to keep in mind that there is an overall decline in law and order in this city. Right? So does that sound familiar? This is sort of what Nixon ran on, and the Republicans have been running on since the 60s, which is law and order, everyone's running around. And Mary, I'm sorry to say this, but the judge warned the jurors that things were so bad in New York that New York was in danger of becoming Philadelphia.
All right, hold it right there. What the hell? What's the judge's problem? Where did he go to judge school?
Look, he went to Temple.
Well, he must have known somebody and not really gone to class or whatever, because he's a dumb judge. He's dumb, hon.
Oh, no, he went to Penn. Okay, that's
like that explains it.
That explains it, exactly. Isaiah Reinders and some of his group are charged with putting up inciting posters. They have so much power, these guys who are the Tammany kind of ward chiefs, that nobody wants to mess with them, even the wealthy and the powerful. The only guy who's given prison time is Ned Buntline, again, the kind of January 6th shaman of the Astor Place riots. And he was accused of attacking a policeman. He gets a year in prison. He is fined $250. And when he gets out of prison, he becomes key in promoting the career of Buffalo Bill Cody, Wild Buffalo Bill. And he becomes a real propagator of the myth of the American West and sort of American manhood on the frontier. Isaiah Reinders continues to climb the political ladder. He becomes the U.S. Marshal for the Southern District, which I can only imagine what the Southern District looked like at the time with Isaiah Reinders as being in charge. Ned Buntline is also implicated in the very deadly draft riots of 1863. Which is another bunch of riots that started in a theater and had a lot to do with race, et cetera, et cetera. It's too much for us to go into. Ned Forrest is never charged and never called to testify. William McCready retires from the stage a few years later. And Charles Dickens, speaking at McCready's retirement dinner in 1851, calls him a dramatic genius who enchanted and enthralled all. Ned Forrest is continuing to go through basically a breakdown. He's not doing well. Remember, he's gone through a divorce and he ends up on the wrong side of it. Clearly, he's not mentally well. And even in his decline and in his kind of distress, he takes note of a rising young actor who he says, that guy is crazy and I'm not going to work with him. And that actor's name was John Wilkes Booth.
Oh!
By the way, Ned Forrest was supposedly Abraham Lincoln's favorite actor. Interesting.
Ned Forrest was?
Yeah, believe it or not. There's all of these contradictions because people are complicated.
See, that's why,
yes.
Again, there's something about Forrest that initially I was like, don't be Now I'm like, hey, I kind of like the guy. I feel like you should lean into comings and goings of Andy Erdman, that you're like a ghost from history yourself. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this episode. And thank you for having me be a part of it. I guess my only concluding thought would be pedophiles bad, puppies good. One other thought on the thought. Even worse maybe are puppy files.
Ouch.
Right? Let that sink in. No, don't. Do not. Erase. That's all.
Oh, all right. Well, I don't know if I can add or should. Okay, so Ned Forrest dies in 1872. And then 5 months later, William Charles McCready dies. Now, bear in mind, McCready was 16 years older than Forrest. So Ned Forrest had kind of a rough life. As for the Astor Place Opera House, there's not much desire to keep doing business as usual. It's like a huge living tombstone. So in 1854, it gets gutted and renamed and converted into something called the Mercantile Library. Exactly 50 years after the bloody events of 1849, Sigmund Freud's The Interpretation of Dreams was published. Now, I know Freud can be a controversial figure for having discredited his female patients' accounts of molestation and seduction. But I'm going to ask that we just set that aside for the moment, because I find Freud's model of fantasy and desire very applicable here, not only to 1849, but to 2025 as well. Freud famously argued that our unconscious wishes, urges, and fantasies come out in the form of symbols in our dreams. Our minds, according to Freud, take images, words, and other disguises from our waking life and fill them with meaning which can be decoded. So if you have a dream about your dentist, but she's got octopus tentacles and the voice of Michael Bublé, that's just the manifest or outer content of your dream. It cloaks or hides some inner wish or impulse that we're in denial about. That's what Freud called the latent content. In a similar way, I think we use symbols, words, celebrities, images from movies, TV, social media, as well as whatever our brains can lay their clever little hands on, to give voice to inner feelings that we can't fully accept. In the case of the Astor Place riots, very much like in today's culture, deep, sometimes primitive, sometimes frightening, occasionally noble wishes and feelings that would cause too much vulnerability and anxiety to express openly tried to make themselves known anyway in the figures of patriotic Ned Forrest, classy William McCready, the terrifying Mob, the untouchable Upper Ten, and so on. But all these masks and symbols, the ones which try to protect us from our human fragility, they never last. In the end, they fail to do what we hope they will do, though we often keep propping them up over and over again, like an addict reaching for a bottle. Maybe, if we can find a way to break through the surface of the dream or fantasy, we may be able to break the chain of illusion. And if we do that, maybe, just maybe, in the end, fewer people will end up needlessly getting hurt and will learn to tolerate life in a different way. All right, so that's it for Season 1 of Feel Familiar, Emotionally Intelligent History. And what we talked about was the Astor Place Theatre Riots and what they might have in common with what's going on today, as well as all the thoughts and feelings that drive political movements. I really want to thank my guest and good friend, Mary Birdsong, and also our wonderful producer, Joshua Dudley. I hope you'll keep an eye out, keep an ear out for Feel Familiar, because I'm already working on Season 2, and I've got something interesting cooking up, and I'll look forward to your being there. Anyway, thanks everyone for listening, and take good care.
There's more to history than what you've been taught. History repeats, it may or may not. Time's got baggage, we all do. Erdman's here to walk us through what, when, where, how, who. Feel familiar. Crack the spine, a times-old script. We're diving in where the facts have slipped. It's history told with wit and care, with ghosts and guests, no thoughts to spare. Who, what, why, how, where. Feel familiar.